Welcome everyone to our global read. We're so happy to have you with us this evening, this day, wherever you're coming from, joining us from. We are so happy to have with us Tyson Yunkaporta, who will be discussing his book, Sand Talk, How Indigenous Thinking Can Save the World. Before we get started, I'd like to thank everyone who's generously donated so we can make this program possible for all of our viewers. Thank you so much. And I'd like to announce our upcoming global read at the end of this month, Education for Survival. That will take place on May 28th, so please hopefully you can join us for that as well. We have a course coming up in a short period of time here called Emotional Intelligence for a Compassionate World, which starts on May 17th. Looking forward to seeing what that's all about, and hopefully you will too. And then June course, Growing Whole, Not Old, Aging in the Pandemic Age, which begins on June 7th. So I would like to just stop my share for now, but I'm going to be introducing just shortly. I'm going to be introducing Al Harris, who will be our host. And then we'll be joining, of course, Tyson for our conversation. So I am just going to take some time here now to introduce these fine young men. With us as our host today is Al Harris, an Indigenous advisor and a member of the Booboomin clan from the Noongar tribe of Western Australia. With his sons, they use many aspects of Aboriginal culture, including dance, music, song, art, and history to bring Indigenous people into the hearts and minds of their audiences. Al, the patriarch, is well known for didgeridoo playing and is equally at home performing traditional songs of his homeland as he is speaking to the world's corporate leaders about inclusion, reconciliation, and leadership. He has shared the stage with the likes of U2 and performed for the Dalai Lama and Nelson Mandela. With his sons Tristan and Aslan Harris, Western Creation have toured the depth and breadth of this land they call home. Al, welcome and thanks for being here with us.
Thanks very much, Kate. How are you? How is everybody today? Hope everybody's good. So good morning and good evening to everybody wherever you may be tuning in to this Zoom today. Kaya, which is hello, from the Wathaurong country in Victoria, Australia, which is where I live. I am a Noongar elder from the southwestern Australia. I'm also a Wongatha man from the Western Desert region. I am a descendant of the Maralinga nuclear bombing victims. These bombs were set off by the British between 1956 and 1963. My name is Alan Harris. I am an Indigenous advisor to Compassion Australia and Compassion Ballarat. Kaya Wanju Ngija, hello and welcome here to Tyson, author of Paper Talk. How are you, brother Tyson?
I'm all right. I'm just spinning out to hear what the wrong coming out.
Yeah, I'm down here. It's cold. Yesterday was absolutely freezing. Today's nice, but it changes constantly all the time. A bit like Nugget River where I'm from. First off, Kate, thank you for that welcome. And you're so close on getting those languages right. It's awesome. So you did a great job. So I'm a Noongar from the southwest of Australia, and my clan is actually the Woman clan. And a lot of people in Australia would know this place. It's called Margaret River. Famous for food, surfing, wine, and, well, caves. And I'm from there too. So there you go. So first off, how are you, Tyson?
Yeah, good. Good. My mob's like my family is Wick and Google mob from Far North Queensland. I belong to Upledge clan up there, so Broga boy here. Yeah, and I guess we'll sort out all these protocols as we go along, but we might have to yarn after and do that properly, because I don't think we got enough space here. This it takes a few hours, people. Sorry, and we're only just meeting for the first time. Anyway. Yeah.
First off, I'd like to ask you a personal question without notice, if that's all right.
Yeah.
How do you feel when your book Sand Talk is mentioned in the same sentence as Bruce Pascoe's successful and yet provoking book Dark Emu?
I don't know, that's marketplace stuff. You know, I guess people have to figure out how to categorize things for an economic system that's not my own, and you know, in order to make sense of it. So I guess, I mean, they can do that. That's fine. Yeah, I guess people just going to frame it how they're going to frame it, and I just I don't really mind. In the book is hard to categorize. This one, so I guess they just sort of chuck it in the basket with, you know, with other things. But you know, the other thing is it's not in the same ballpark, not even in the same sport. You know, economically speaking, in terms of sales and all that kind of thing. So, you know, when people sort of chuck that in with, you know, things like Bruce Pascal and Stan Grant, I'm just you know, like I'm just a tall boy over here with a little book. It's sold a few, but not that much. You know, so I'm not even. So I don't know. People are like throwing it in with that kind of thing. It's like, well, yeah, that's all right, but it's I mean, it's not really accurate from any perspective, really. But I mean, you know, I'm not terribly concerned with accuracy. How about you?
No, not really. The beauty about it is that you know, people ask questions and they're talking about our people, so that's the main thing. I think that gets the conversation going.
Yeah,
and that's where I want to be. I want people, you know, talking about who we are, what's coming out of our elders, the questions, and also the provoking ideas that need to be put forward on a national scale. So thanks for that. On page 3, you mentioned if you don't move with the land will move with you. Can you speak on this a little bit more?
yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, there's a kind of a hangover in science and in most people's scientific worldview, a kind of hangover from early Christianity, you know, that sort of, I don't know, it kind of survived the Enlightenment. This idea that the world is sort of static and mechanical, and that, you know, all the animals, all the plants, all the people, all the ecosystems, that these are where God put them. You know, this idea that they're there and they don't move, and there's not much exchange between the systems. But we know different. You know, there's always exchange between those systems, and all these systems globally are interlinked, interrelated, always have been. You know, even through ocean currents, air currents, everything else. But you know, every ecosystem moves about 100 meters every year, at least. And, you know, there's always exchange across systems. There are always migrations of animals. There are a lot of different species, especially in the air and the water, that migrate, you know, around the world every year, you know. So there's a lot of exchange happening. And there's always been a lot of exchange and trade across from all our mobs on this continent, but everywhere else as well. You know, yeah, there's always been a lot of travel and movement and trade, you know, even across oceans, and, you know, marrying across and adopting across and all kinds of things going on like that for time out of memory, you know. So the idea that if our human societies are patterned on the structures of the land, on the complexities of the landscape that's constantly in motion, then our ways of being also have to move with that. And we do move. And some places where the land moves very slowly, like in Central Australia, and, you know, things move very slowly there in human societies, but they still move. You have to move in response and in relation to the landscape, or you know, that big mother will just shake you off like fleas off a dog in the end.
Yeah. Certainly when referring to the animals, it's true that it is true that in keeping the balance of nature, all animals live by active, reactive behavior.
Yeah.
I mean, I guarantee that many thousands of years, even the ant had to learn how to react once they had knowledge of approaching rain.
That's it. Well, and they have that, you know, they have big ceremony, ants, and they're connected with other, you know, in those kinship pairs throughout the system in that way. and they're always responding to those seasonal signals. But they're also triggering a lot of seasonal signals to the ants. You know, when they start flying, that's something that's a response, but it's also a sign, you know, that the air is just right, and that, you know, that temperature is just right, and you know, and you
I've
know
gone from
where
Noongar.
that season changes there, especially Noongar. You know, you've got that big ant stuff and associated with that that butterfly business as well.
Butterfly
Goes
and the ant.
out to
Beautiful.
Rottnest Island and all that. You know, you got the big
There's a
story
trio.
there.
There's a trio working together as one. So
That's
yeah,
him with that same bush there.
Oh yeah. Mother Earth continually educates us in her ways as a mother would train her young-born baby. Is that right?
Yep.
I mean, the eagle pushing her young out of the nest.
Yeah, and sometimes that there's
Can
just
be harsh.
some kids just need a smack.
Oh yeah. Are you allowed to say that now?
Oh, you're not allowed to do it, but
That's
it's not
it.
illegal for the kid to need a smack.
Yeah. So in other words, you'll learn to adapt your habits, or you'll be diverted to living a different form of lifestyle until you have adopted her way of existence. So in short, look, I totally agree with you there. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's I don't know, but I mean, all of these ideas in this book are like everything else. They're kind of fluid. You know, I mean, it's a couple of years ago now, and you know, the yarns have moved on from a lot of the yarns in that book, and there's deeper knowledge, you know, that's come about through a lot of yarns.
I might talk about that a little bit later on then.
Yeah, look, I think that's just some foundational stuff that just sparks talk, you know, and thinking, and I think the thinking goes, you know, even within a few weeks, you know, the thinking goes way beyond what's in that book. You know, that's just like I keep trying to tell people, this is you know, it's some ideas kind of written by a tall boy who's been asked to pass on some messages, but is also trying to translate ideas across into other cultural ways of looking at the world as well, and to see what sort of falls out of that middle ground and that creative space in between. And you know, because there's a lot of changes happening so rapidly now. You know, new things keep getting brought into being, you know, all the time. You know, it's that Moore's law of technology. It's just exponentially increasing, and we just don't have story for all these things yet. And so, you know, and the yarns are happening with the old people, but they need story. They're like, well, what's the story for this? Like, we see your name, Al, but the way it's written there looks like AI. It's like, well, what's the story? What's the story for that AI, you know? So I tell them about that old Jewish story about the golem. I tell them about Frankenstein. I tell a lot of foundational stuff like that. And then people have to figure out, the elders have to figure out, like, how do we classify these things? How do we categorize these things in that, you know, totemic system, everything else? Who's going to keep that story? You know, what's the song cycle for an algorithm? Geez, you know, we can't keep up. We haven't got enough songmen to do the work to keep pace with all this.
I think we had enough songs. Bloke. Yeah, I think we had enough songs, you know, in days past, but wow, just, you know, they call it progress, but it really isn't progress. You know, it's really cutting us thin.
Yeah.
Can you explain the differences of indigenous knowledge and spiritual discernment?
Indigenous knowledges and spiritual discernment. I think one informs the other.
I've always called what others call deep dreaming. I've always called it my rock medicine. And it's always been my strength that I go to, you know, always told to go to the rock, to break on the rock, you know.
Yeah. See, I immediately in my mind, I like categorize that spiritual discernment as a settler thing. Yeah. But I think like in our way, it's the indigenous knowledge and it's the law of the land that pretty much sets the parameters for your spiritual discernment, for what you know is real in the world, and how you know you need to act, react, all of these things, how you need to behave as a custodian, how you need to behave as a community member, all this, you know. and you just you do your best. And if you break that, then you are the kid that does get a slap.
Everybody points at you. We know that one.
Oh, that's it. And it's shame straight away.
Yep.
But see, then shame is different from settlers have guilt, and it's a different thing. You know, guilt is something that they do to themselves and turn inwards, and it kind of poisons them, you know. But shame's a different thing because it's distributed, and it's I mean, it hurts a lot more than guilt. It hurts you a lot, but you know there's light at the end of the tunnel, and you get through it, and you'll be changed. You'll be different when you come out the other side, and that's the purpose of punishment, in our way, is to like you know, transform a person. It's not to you know, end them and make them this scapegoat or whatever. Make everybody else feel better for a minute.
Awesome. On page 17, you've got a great visual table of contents you created for this book. And a lot of these questions are for people that are listening today, Tyson. All tribes have similar symbols that they teach from.
Yeah. That's it.
Yep.
Well,
so each tribe has its own version of events, yeah?
That's him.
Now, you have obviously learnt from many elders.
Yeah.
As you have taken important keynotes from each of these skilled keepers of knowledge, it seems that you've given us a challenge. You've certainly given me a challenge. First off, to put this to use and promote ancient knowledge, comprehend and marvel at the endless stream of truth shared with us from the depths of the elders, and understand that each person, indigenous or non-indigenous, has the right and now the opportunity of learning millennium-aged processes.
Yeah, well, processes is the key. You know, these things. It's hard for elders to arrive at what to share from a visual image like that. You know, because those images they contain power. You know, like they carry that, as you know, that totemic energy from that source story. And the more those, and of course, you know, when you're doing your sand talk, like you're drawing those images on the ground, or even doing it on a piece of wood or a rock or anything, you know, a lot of the time when you're doing it on the ground, well, usually that protocol is to erase that, because you can't leave that image standing for too long. You know, it's bad. You know, and a lot of places it's only women can do that. You know, some places only men are doing that, etc. You know, so you walk careful with that. And elders have to figure out what they share with these images and decide, because they know that as soon as it goes out into the world, it's going to be replicated over and over and over into infinity. And that's going to drain that spiritual energy. You know, it'll drain the potency from that story. You know, so they got to think about how they modify that image, you know, for other people to look at, and what they can withstand, you know, being out there in permanent, you know, ink in the world. It's very difficult. It's a bit of a sacrifice. Like you have to sacrifice, you know, potency and energy on this side in order to get, you know, the patterns and processes across to people who need to be brought back in under the law of the land wherever they are on the planet. You know, so so a lot of those images were designed, you know, specifically or altered specifically as, you know, part of almost ritual magic. That, I mean, so Old Man Juma's stuff, especially, you know, he's doing that business where he wants that to change when people see it and they have story with it and they see the pattern. The idea is that it changes their patterning biologically and emotionally and mentally, spiritually. It changes their pattern. So you get a lot of people who are reading that book and saying, "Oh, I feel like it's changed my DNA. I feel like it's changed me at the molecular level." And I'm like, well, that's not from, and they're trying to find what were the words that he wrote there that changed me. And it's like, well, it's none of the words. It's nothing I said. There's just half a dozen symbols in there that are designed to change you, you know, and they do that. And I've had a lot of, like, you know, really conservative people and older people who don't believe in anything spiritual at all sort of, you know, contact me and say, it's changed my DNA. I've had like women like contacting me and say, oh, my husband doesn't recognize my smell anymore. It's changed my smell. And you know what that smells all about, bros.
There's too much to go in on that one, so I won't touch
I
that
tell
one.
you, we won't even start. Shame.
That's
But then there's, we got, and you get a lot of problem messages like that. People send you story all the time. But there's this one old fella, like in the United States, and I've become really good friends with him. And we started out talking about like aspects of the emu story. Like I can't share all that story with anyone, but we're talking about that idea in emu and the narcissism kind of thing, that ego. Because we started off our yarns like that, and I went on his show about 4 times. And he's sort of a big name, especially in tech. Like he's the guy who invented domain names and all this sort of stuff. And so recently he sends me this photo and says, so I'm living in the mountains in the United States in Appalachia, and this freaking emu showed up in my backyard. What's going on?
No way.
Sent me this photograph. He's there in the middle of Appalachia, like banjos and stuff like going on there. and guns and bows and arrows, and goodness me. And
that must have been the same time I couldn't see the Milky Way, was it? It disappeared on us.
That must have been it. He must have like come down from there, and he's popped up in this fella's backyard. And I'm like,
beautiful, I love it.
And so
that
he's like,
amazing.
is one of his catchphrases is like, people mention spirituality, I get my gun. Like he refuses to acknowledge spirit in any way. And so there's this fella with all his guns, and all his skepticism about spirit, and he's contacting me saying, what's this sign mean? And it's like, and that's how much it changed people, just that ritual magic of that images. So and it's like, I'm just, like I said, I'm a tall boy, so I can't make that judgment about what to share and what not to share. So I just got to be real careful to follow those instructions, what they do, and make sure that the person who's sharing that with me is in their right mind on that day too. Because sometimes everybody has a bad day, shares something they shouldn't. You can't take that. You got to keep coming back over years. Yeah.
Well, that leads us on to the next part that I do have. Sorry if I cut you off there, brother. That kind of leads me to the next bit. Should the reader search for a pathway from their own mind and journey when experiencing indigenous connection, or is there an arrival destination and finding truth through your thoughts?
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about people are ringing up saying DNA, etc.
Yeah.
Then also a guy, who's obviously a materialistic person in the States, suddenly, questioning it. Maybe there is a spirituality, in our life. So, is this finding truth from your thoughts, do you think?
Nah, it's not from me. Like it's all, so each of us is carrying just this big web of relations, with us, and all our story, all our thoughts, all our knowledge is not in our heads. It exists in those connections, within that web of relations. So each of us is carrying this universe of knowledge. And there's something beautiful that happens when those webs genuinely come into contact with each other. So that mycelium networks under the ground, with all the, like everyone's talking about that now, those fungal networks under the ground. And yeah, look, I don't see it as somebody having individual knowledge. Like you can't know anything on your own.
Yep.
I don't know anything on my own. I'm not some fabulous artist, creator, writer that has this wisdom and is sharing it. It's like, no. I'm just I'm just in this web of relations. And this web of relations, I'm following some of those relationships and responding to like people with more cultural authority than me, to sort of guide me in who and how else I connect up with those. And there's I don't carry much knowledge at all. I know about 6 things, because I'm a boy. But I each of us has a particular skill, and my skill is in translation. of ideas and kind of making things funny.
How did you find your
simple.
role?
How did I
How
find
did you
it?
find your role?
I didn't. I've got all these other like ideas of what I'd like to be doing. You know what I mean? But they,
Mhm.
I mean, you know what it's like. Them old fellas, they have jobs for you to do, and then they tell you to do it, and you're in these networks of obligation with them, and you just got to do it. Yeah, and I'm kind of, I don't know. I'd like to just relax one day. But yeah, so finding the role it's just about responding to those relational obligations and respecting that cultural authority of people who have things for you to do, and and just trusting that reciprocal relations in that network, that knowledge, energy, status, even in our community, things like that this will all come back to you one day. The more you're putting out and getting done. It's just a lot of those things are disrupted now, though. So I mean, I can't trust that completely, because that's our old law way, and that's in place, everywhere to some extent. But then there's also a lot of competing stuff with, there's a lot of competition and backstabbing kind of thing, and dog eat dog stuff going on as well. So it's like you can't just trust that doing the right thing is going to get you to the right place now. You got to be prepared to take one for the team if you're working like this.
Oh man, that's repetitive.
Yeah,
that is repetitive. That's the saddest thing in a lot of cases. You see a lot of possibilities in a community and possibilities within inside that community and individuals in a community, and then all of a sudden it just sort of does a U-turn and goes the other way, and you go, oh boy, what could have been,
Yeah. Well, look, when I mean, it's not, and you can't beat up on people for that, because when populations get disrupted so horrendously, then there are going to be pathologies like that.
Well, I'm a Noongar, so as a Noongar, beating up people is sort of something that's part of what our DNA is down in the southwest there, which disrupted our smooth interaction with other communities from around Australia, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You've tasted it. You've been there. You've hung out there.
Yeah. Well, the closer you are to mine, the worse it gets.
Oh yeah, tell me about it.
Along with the racism. WA is one of those places where I mean, in Melbourne, in my first couple of weeks here in Melbourne, you get the words shouted out of cars. And this was before I lost my suntan. So I'm walking along, I'm getting N-word. And then a couple of months later, as the tan started to fade, because there's no good sun down here, then I was getting people shouting "wog" at me, and Bollywood, and like people just shouting weird stuff out of cars. And some guy the other week said, "What part of Sri Lanka are you from?" It's all that weirdness. But that's nothing. Melbourne's about as good as it gets for racism. It's very mild. Dose, a small viral load. But Perth, they will spit at you out of that car.
Oh yeah,
they'll spit right in your face when they drive past. Yeah, and
they throw things.
That is not unusual.
No. Back to where we were. There's something that I really wanted to talk about, and we're mentioning Western Australia, and we have a really important connection called the Pinnacle. Have you been up there?
Pinnacles, nah.
Okay, it's just north of Yanship near Durin Bay, and it's called the Pinnacle Desert. And it is probably about 40, 50 acres of sandstone rocks in monolith style, just straight up. And there's hundreds of them. Now, even though you may not know that, you might be able to give us an answer on my question here. On your stories of massive carved rocks from your ancestral line, do you think that there may be a connection, say, from the pinnacles that I've just mentioned and other specifically monolith sites in Australia and beyond? And if the connections are reachable for travellers of the past, why doesn't it happen today? Or does it happen today? Where were you last night?
Oh, well, Well, that's on a lot of levels, that one, Unc, and some of them we're not going to talk here.
Too many years, brother. Too many years.
But yeah, well, I mean, all these sites are connected, right? You know, the songlines are there for a reason, and it's the lifeblood and the energetic system of a continent, and not just a continent, because that goes under the, as you know, you got all that drowned country there too, and it still goes there, and you got the interaction with the dolphins, the whales, everything else, bringing up them children's spirits, everything around like that. There's songlines that go under the sea and up into Asia, and you know, we've had these things forever. And we're calling them songlines now, but that's, you know, the translation in English, it doesn't really get across what it is, you know. And there are, and I guess the stone sites that have been you know, put there by, like, you know, physical modern human people, you know, in those ways, you know, them old ones, them stone circles, but then those ones that, you know, the ones that have got the processions and the stages where you go through, you know, and all the Bora, all these things, you know, these, I mean, a lot of these ones, they're kind of like maps, you know, they're kind of like maps, but where the map is the thing, it doesn't just represent the thing, it kind of is. And, you know, when you work that in a certain way, then there's all kinds of travel goes on, you know. But it's also, you know, with these maps, it helps. I mean, it's a lot of it is a teaching thing, so you can walk people through songlines and take them to places, you know, before they actually physically go there, etc., etc. And that's getting too close to starting to say things that we can't say anyway.
Yeah,
I don't know what you're trying to get me in trouble or speared or something.
No. Just,
but you know what I mean. These
I know what you mean.
Yeah,
and
they're
because
everywhere.
of our, yeah,
they're all
because of our
connected.
global, they are. I mean, I've always known that. And the thing is that with our global audience today, there's always a lot of questions. Sometimes there's not a chance, there's not an opportunity to hear somebody speak like this. You've got to, you know, look it up on a computer or whatever to find an answer. You don't know who the writer is. So
yeah,
some of these questions I'm asking you are coming from that field rather than my own personal field.
yeah.
So I hope you don't mind that, brother.
No, I know the difference. I know the difference, and I know the purpose and all that. I got you.
Yep. Look, I've always been led to believe that you're either indigenous or you're not indigenous. You talked about something in the book, and I'm saying, okay, and I want to know, what is your understanding?
What, with you indigenous or non-indigenous? Well, I kind of put a provocation out there because, like, I kept getting stuck for years on this thing of, well, we didn't call ourselves indigenous before. You know, we didn't see ourselves as, you know, aborigines or natives or any of these things, like, as a separate thing. We're people, you know, human beings. It's only when someone comes in and occupies, you know, with their culture, with their economy, with the guns, everything else, with the military, navy, is when they occupy and they are calling themselves something else. And they're classifying you that way. You are this savage thing. You know, it's only then when we have to start saying that. And then, I don't know, it's spending time with settler babies and children too. I keep, you know, before they've been sort of trained up in the, you know, that kind of industrial way. And then looking at all the cognitive studies that have been done from, you know, cultures that are not industrial yet, cultures that are in the middle of industrializing, cultures that are fully industrialized, and then looking at a common thread of cognitive differences there that all come back to that same root of child rearing practices. You know, I start to look at these and I start to think, well, what does it take to turn somebody into indigenous or non-indigenous person? And I come back to this idea that everybody's born as, you know, what we currently call indigenous. Everybody's born as, you know, it's I don't know, we're human beings. So to be indigenous is to be somebody, you know, who belongs to a community, an ancestral community that has that link, that has that memory, carries that memory, and and does its best to keep that law of what it is to be a human being that's embedded in a landscape, you know. So that's it. I know there's so many definitions out there, but I would start just at the base foundation. Yeah, that's something that we do, you know, have in common, no matter how much your bloodline's disrupted, no matter how much your culture or language or anything else is disrupted. You do belong to a community that's keeping that, that's holding that, and that no single person in that community holds all the knowledge. It's distributed, you know, and you find that you have parts of that, and that you have responsibilities for keeping parts of that, and they come together when we all come together, you know. I really struggled against for a long time settlers coming into that knowledge, or coming into an understanding or reclaiming their humanity through looking at these patterns. You know, I spent at least 10 years going, nah, you can't have that. You know what I mean? And the elders really slapped me for it. You know, they said, well, we have to bring these people back under the law of the land. If we don't, everything and everyone's going to die. And I kind of, you know, I lost a lot of credibility and a lot of status with elders from disagreeing with that, like openly and quite being that angry young fellow, you know. But I've started to come around.
Look, I've always seen that personally, from a personal point of view as an elder in my community, that if a young man doesn't go through that sort of thing, then you can't teach him anything. So, you know, it's a process. It is a process that I think I look for when I've got, you know, within my own children. You know, you look for someone that can learn, that can be taught, that's humble.
That's it.
For want of a better word, who's actually approachable to be taught. So, you know, that was probably the best thing, you know, from the outside for you. And that's the moment that would have set the new you. That's the moment that set your future, I think.
Yeah.
By the sounds of it, that's from me.
Well, I think it came, as I said, like, I accepted the slap. I didn't disagree with it, but I accepted that sort of, you know, that shame.
And how many of our mob just disagree and walk away? They want to, you know, it's either fight or flight.
Yeah.
You know, they want to fight you or they want to take off.
Yeah.
You know, so well done for sticking around and fighting it, brother. I really mean that.
I'm still doing it. There's no end point. Yeah. You know, you mentioned before, is there an end point? Is there a no destination? You said there's no destination. You keep walking. We're a creature that's been designed to walk at least 30 Ks a day. So
oh man, I was going to ask you when do I get there, but oh well, there you go.
I'd ask me. I don't know.
On page 59, you mentioned interconnected self-organizing systems. Is it hard to apply first law to late? I've called it late law. Is it hard to apply first law to late law? Nobody wants to listen for a start, and apparently it is construed as alien thinking. But isn't that what Steve Hawking is chasing? Alien thinking? Come on.
It's so funny. Oh look, I mean, there's a lot of Silicon Valley right now who's like just tripping balls on all kinds of substances and like communing with what they think is this other world, or you know, and they're all talking about these machine elves they're talking to and all this kind of stuff. It's really interesting. And I don't think people have ever been more open. You know, when I first wrote the book, people, like, the responses were like, oh, it's interesting, but, you know, are you being a bit negative about the future? And I don't know, that's a bit weird, all that stuff. And, you know, I can't really take that on. I can't really make room for that. It's a bit weird, but nice book. I mean, it's a very interesting book. Then COVID happened and everyone panicked, you know, and people are kind of open to things. They're like, show me some ancient wisdom going to help me survive this. I want to survive this. I want to get through the apocalypse, but I still want to keep all my shit. Can I do that? So people are reaching, you know, and there's a critical mass of people through that seeking that they're doing. There's a critical mass of people all over the world, all kinds of people who they're not only open, but they're actually, you can see they're progressing. You know, they're starting to come out of that early childhood civilization mindset and actually moving into a post-civilization kind of adolescence, like a time of transition, and they're ready. You know, they want to hear people, and they want processes. You know, and they keep getting frustrated with people just giving them, critiques of colonialism, or giving them just recounts of histories, or like bits and pieces of, oh, this is how you light a fire or something like that, and they're like, yeah, that's not. They're ready for process, and there's not many of us focus on that, because we've been in we've just been in survival mode, just trying to direct attention towards the important things for so long, like just to get through and survive, that we kind of focus more on the content than those processes. And when you start to talk about law, it's a big shift for them to be able to switch from their idea of that paper law and digital law, and to be able to shift into an understanding of the law of the land and that first law, and how that is inexorable, immutable. There's no bit of paper that can cover that.
On page 78, you speak about the need for us to adapt from one era to the next. Is the next era coping with many forms of global disease? If so, is this Mother Nature's cutbacks?
You're cheeky.
I know, I'm very cheeky. All I can do is say I'm a Noongar, sorry.
Okay.
And I'm not.
Well, thank God. Mother Nature isn't a farmer, is not needing to cull, but there are, things move, things shift, and there's, collateral damage happens there. But, I don't know, it's the group, it's the collective, it's the species, and it's the interspecies relations, and the patterns of and all the ecological niches, all the systemic stuff. This is what carries through, and this is what survives. I think if you have that focus, as you know, on the individual, and that sort of that desire for immortality, in this form right now, that I'm terrified of dying and I want to live forever. If you have that, then when the country drowns and a few people don't get to high ground in time, then that seems like the biggest disaster in the world. But I don't know. Look, if you're following the signs and you're moving with the land, then you don't have that. It's not Mother Nature's fault. She's not pruning anything. It's just if there are cultures and species that refuse to move with her, then they're killing themselves. That's not her doing it. That's not the earth killing them. They're just just through complete denial, just eradicating themselves.
I like. So on page 81, our communities need to share knowledge with each other while maintaining their own unique systems. I mean, hallelujah, brother. I'm sick of that. You remember that thing, you're not from around here, are you? Mentality. Remember that?
Oh,
about 10, 15 years ago.
I don't know.
Yeah, you've been through that. You've travelled, you know.
I'm in Victoria right now, so.
Yeah. Well, you're not from around here, brother, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough. People want to do that. Look, I get it, because if people have spent generations just trying to carve out a bit of a niche where there's a little bit of money coming in through funding or through benevolent this or that, and that there's selected people in that community who collect those revenues and then are trusted to distribute that, and there's like just enough there for them to survive, and then some Murray fella, some Noongar fella comes in and just steps into that, and suddenly that precious resource of the white gaze is directed away from local community. I'm like, fair enough if people get a bit wild. But I guess, I don't see that as much in Perth. I don't know, especially Noongar Budja, you see real, and then north too. I haven't spent much time down at the breast there, so I can't speak for that. But from what I've seen in WA, there is that open kind of thing, and there is that exchange and that welcome, and people, like, I think it's because there's so many Kickett's and Morrises and
that's only one family, so
yeah, there's I mean, every time you turn
hundreds,
around, you come on the East Coast, you go to any mining community, and half of the indigenous workers employed there are from WA.
Yeah.
Then you go to WA and you see like half the people there are like, Kennedys, and like it's all, Gamilaroi and Wiradjuri, you know what I mean? It's like there's this, because you're not allowed to be employed and functional in your own community. You have to, they'll only employ you as far away from as possible from your home community. So we have those exchanges, and we have those, and as you know, you get welcomed in, and there's people looking after you, and that we've got our own kind of internal welfare system and safety net operating all the time. We look after each other like that. It's there's some places, metro places, not name many names, where they just don't do that. That's dog eat dog, and there's like a mafia kind of situation going on there. Yeah.
Listen, I've just Kate's just sent a word through of some questions. I don't know, how do we do this, Kate? You want to come in?
Sure, thanks. Wow, what a great conversation. Thanks, gentlemen. So we have right now at least 3 questions. I'm going to send the first one in from Kirsten. She says that I understand that in the past, indigenous knowledge was only passed on to those who had proven their ability to accurately remember and transmit that information. If that's correct, how does that tradition play out as you share your knowledge with settlers?
That's tricky, because look, there's that we have that pedagogy, okay, where you like we don't have trial and error. We don't learn by trial and error. That's shame. We talked about shame before. You can't like have a go at something and stuff it up and learn from your mistake. That's shame. You have to observe, and you have to be in such profound relation with the master that you're observing. You have to be so connected with them and in relation with them that you're inhabiting their practice as you observe them, to the point where you do that enough, then the first time you attempt that process, you get it 100% right. And you're expected to get it 100% right from the first time you do it. There is just that expectation of excellence. We don't like mediocrity, and we don't like trial and error here. But so it is interesting when you're interacting with other cultures, and they just want to dive straight in and try stuff out. They want to like, they've been to one ritual on a reservation in the States, and they're like, oh damn, I gotta go and get myself a pipe. I want to be a pipe carrier. I want to get like a feather fan. I want to get eagle feather fan, and I'm going to do ceremony at home, and I'm going to get these crystals. Yeah. And I want that dream catcher, and I have no idea how it works, but I'm just going to mess around with it until I figure it out through trial and error, and it doesn't work like that. There's no access to that knowledge. There's only sort of new age. It's hard to say it without swearing. Practice.
That's a good word for it, brother.
Yeah, and it doesn't, because it's not grounded in a pedagogy of shame, because it's in a lawless, pedagogy. Then it doesn't work. But in our way, if you're doing that way of teaching, learning, knowledge transmission, and you're doing it lawfully, then it will just work out just fine. You will master that. If you're not ready for that, then you won't even be offered that. But that doesn't mean you're a lesser person. I'm somebody who's not ready for most things, which is why I'm like a nearly 50-year-old boy. I kept referring to myself as a tall boy before, because uncle, you know what that means. But it's I'm not ready for most things. I'm silly. I like a lot of time I got no filters, and I'll just say things. So, and I got like I joke around, and that's like, my family will call it wutla, or like laula, or something like that. It's like this is somebody who's loved and respected, and you look after them, and they've got all rights to everything in the community, as everybody does. but there's only so far in the knowledge you can go if you're that person, and that's not it's not a low status thing.
No.
It's
No.
not like, the people who have the knowledge are like, oh, these are Bill Gates, and then everybody else is like, Mexico, or Venezuela.
I think that's where he's going. He just got divorced, didn't he? So he might be in Mexico anyway.
Yeah, that's in my head that this morning. Like, yeah. That's
what's your next question?
And that's important because that affects stock prices. That affects the stock market, which affects a lot of other things. If you got that indigenous complexity view, that one couple,
I got divorced,
one couple have prices, exactly. Look, nothing would happen if I got divorced. That would have no impact on the world. But Bill Gates just waking up one morning and have an argument with his wife, that can like destroy small countries around that place. That means it's like, right, I'm going to frack everything in this country. Yeah.
What was in the coffee?
So,
all right, what's the next question, Kate? Sorry.
Next question is from Terry, also a fellow Australian. Can you say more about the difference between guilt, the settlers, and shame, and the process for responding to it, like punishment? And can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, look, there are a lot of theorists in the world right now, particularly people who are looking for better governance models and systems and ways to make cultures and social dynamics actually work in the world, because at the moment it's just these ridiculous infant ones that are just tearing everything apart. So there are a lot of people doing a lot of research around this, and just one of the things that comes out is this concept of shame versus guilt, and that the guilt thing is arising from what they call weird cultures, Western educated, industrialized, rich, democratic cultures. That those cultures, from the start of when Protestantism arose and people started trying to have an individual personal connection with God instead of one that's mediated through community and institutions, that was when literacy arose and became a common thing right across the community. So people, individuated all of their spirituality, all of their thought, everything else. And that rapid individualization and the spread of that throughout the world. I mean, it's still a minority of the people in the world are like that, which is weird because it's the culture that dominates the entire planet. Every place is expected to take this on board to some extent, but it is still a minority culture on the planet. But they own everything. So this one, it's very different. One of the symptoms of the weird pathology is guilt. And guilt is part of that personalized relationship with God, where you turn your guilt inwards and you autonomously and with your own individual agency seek the evil inside of you. You seek the sin inside of you, and that guilt is just this fire that burns it out of you. And then you self-select your punishments and you carry them out in secret and in private in all these little spells and rituals just to try and eradicate the guilt out of you. And you can see that with coming up really strong with people sort of claiming that they're, that like all white people are racist and can never change and they're terrible people, and people going, oh, I'm white and I can't change. I'm irredeemably flawed and I'm just going to spend my life flogging myself with this white guilt. It's kind of unproductive. But see, then there's this idea in the literature of this collective sort of shaming as a thing that goes on as well, and it's this scapegoating thing that's been tied up with mimetics and all this other theory, But our Aboriginal shame, it's neither of those things. Like the way we use shame, it's like it's in a completely different word. We'll say I'm shame. Or that's shame, that's something that happens to all of us together. And it's not just you that's shame from your behavior. The people who are responsible for you and in relation to you, there's that shame as well. And there's kind of a feedback loop that's coming between you as an individual and the community, whereby you all need to resolve that and you all need to grow from that together. So there's a lot of agency in our idea of shame, but it's also a hell of a really good thing that'll stop you from going too far. So a blackfellow could have come up with the idea for CRISPR and gene editing, but just shame alone would have prevented us from actually just throwing that out into the world, so that people are making bloody glow-in-the-dark chihuahuas in their backyard and in their shed with their $10,000 CRISPR setup. That wouldn't happen. Under Aboriginal law, there would have been like 100 years of shame first to deal with from the people who are coming up with that idea.
In my language, you call it kundan, brother.
Yeah,
kundan.
Yeah.
When somebody makes a mistake on a footy field, we go, "Oh, shame job."
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the vernacular for many things.
Yeah.
Time is fleeting. So, Katie, what's another one, please?
Yeah, I think we have time for just one more, and maybe Tyson.
I just want to finish up on what I've got here. Yeah,
I'll keep them good and brief.
So from Barbara, she said, "I loved your book and your style of writing that so gracefully spans two worlds and reveals so much wisdom. What will your next book be?"
Well, I wanted to write a Viking novel, but I found out I'm actually no good at writing fiction. And then I also actually met some Vikings, and then I felt shame from appropriating their culture and simplifying it too much, because they're actually really, like, it's a really complex culture that I'd have to spend a good 40 years inhabiting before I could write a story about it. So I'm kind of stuck. I'm writing, I'm going to co-author things from now on, because I don't like that feeling. There were so many people and so many stories in that book, that there wasn't enough room for 100 co-authors on the cover, but I don't like that idea that people have, that I wrote that book and that I am some kind of amazing genius who has wisdom or something like that, and that I'm the product, not the book and the stories and the whole people, So I just want to co-author things now. I'm kind of working on one, like writing one with my woman now too. So it's kind of coming out of that man-woman relation. And we're not talking specifically about that, but hopefully people will see the kind of productivity that comes out of that right relation when it's working well. But, that'll take a while, because I got to make sure it's working well and we don't Bill and Melinda this thing up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Kate, can I just finish up on it? Oh, sorry, Kate, you go.
Sure. Go ahead, Al. And then we'll wrap after you're done. I just want to say goodbye to everybody and thank you. So just go ahead and we'll go from there.
Yeah, just a couple of things that I had when I was reading the book. I think you release the possum out of the tree, brother, so to speak, revealing to the world that we as indigenous elders from the world's oldest ongoing culture have known for thousands and thousands of years, and also thousands of generations. Knowledge is inbred into the very fabric of our existence. If we look hard enough and look deep enough within the soul and the spirit of this land, if we look at it long enough, you will find the answers to all the questions mankind has been asking for many years. Is the rest of the world ever going to wake up to this knowledge now? Or do we have to keep this knowledge concealed? Do we want to keep this knowledge concealed? Is it our right to share this vast pool of knowledge? And if we do share this vast pool of knowledge, who has the right to share? And will all the information gained be sold off to the highest bidder, as has happened to our culture and history over the last 250 years?
Yeah. Well, look, the careful mechanism that's built into that book is exactly what you said at the start, the idea of knowledge processes. People can come into dialogue with knowledge processes. People can learn protocols. People can learn, ways of knowledge transmission. Like, for example, understanding that trial and error doesn't help, and that you want to start with mastery. That's not sacred knowledge. That's just how humans are supposed to do things. So pretty much all of the processes mentioned in that book are kind of, they're human things. And all of the trails that have been very carefully left there from these stories from the old people are trails that are leading towards a person just learning how to listen to the land and to come into the land, the law of the land where they are,
Awesome.
and at least being able to perceive it. And from there, they get protocols, systems, processes. But, that sacred knowledge, that stays where it is. You
Yep.
know, that
Always.
that does not get released unless old people decide to release it. I can't imagine they would ever want to release that, even if the world was going to end in 5 minutes, because that's supposed to be kept. You
Yep.
know, and who the hell should have access to that? You know, if
Exactly.
people are advanced enough or like, you know, trustworthy enough to have access, and the old people will find them. You know, but why
Awesome.
would you aspire? Why would you even aspire to having that knowledge? There's a
Yeah.
universe of amazing patterns and things to engage with and relationships to have. And you could, it's just nice to know that that knowledge is there and that someone's keeping it for us all and enacting that ceremony and keeping the universe in motion, and that they'll
With
let you
me
know the
personally,
parts that they want you to do.
yeah, with me personally, when somebody asks me questions in regards to, you know, that level,
Yeah.
you know, I'm rapt because, you know, they're seeing something in our system, in our cultures that do have answers for, you know,
Yeah.
events and things, you know, happening
Yeah.
at that time. Now I've got to finish up here because our time's up. So a couple of things before I hand back to Kate, who's very patient there. Thank you, Kate. You spoke of Noongar stories in your book from my country. I'm immensely proud of my Noongar and Wangitha dreaming. Rob Riley was one of my best brothers in the entire world, and he would always say to me, you can't be wrong if you're right. From my point of view, look, I'm a simple indigenous man. You truly are present-day cultural fire starter, brother, and I know that your fires will burn forever. So Tyson, from me, thank you very much, brother.
That's the best thing I've heard all year. That's really something coming from you, eh?
Thanks,
Yeah,
brother.
I love that.
We will
Thank you so
talk
much.
soon.
Yeah, we're gonna have to now.
Yep. Yeah.
Well,
Too much laughing going on.
I want to thank you so much, Al, for being a wonderful host. Thank you so much. Tyson, thank you so much for your book, for your conversation with Al, and for the wisdom that you shared with us this evening, where I am at. and thank you again for giving up your time, and we appreciate it very much. Good day, good night, good morning, wherever you're coming from. Thanks for being here with us.
Yeah, thanks to everybody.
Bye.
Okay.
All right, Tyson, I'll be in touch, brother.
Yeah.
Through the people that know.